Today we speak with Gord Smith, the founder of Alta Consulting. Gord is an entrepreneur who specializes in transforming small and mid-sized companies. We're diving headfirst into the vital topics that are the pulse of any thriving business: people, strategy, execution, cash flow, innovation, brand promise, and metrics. We'll discuss the fascinating art of attracting and retaining top talent. Gord will share his unique strategies and his approach to ensuring team alignment with a company's vision and values. Our discussion will extend to the formulation and execution of a winning business strategy and a whole lot more. So fasten your seatbelts as we go on this comprehensive journey into the world of business optimization with Gord Smith. Welcome to Articulate This. Let's get into it. Today's guest is Gord Smith. He's the founder of Alta Consulting. He's on a quest to supercharge small and mid-sized companies through leadership development and sales and marketing strategy growth. Welcome, Gord.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So tell me more about Alta Consulting. How did you decide to form this company?
Okay, yeah, so it's a bit of a long story. I'll try to make an abbreviated version. So I had spent a number of years in tech and professional services. I worked for SAP and Siebel, which is now part of Oracle, and Deloitte. And I had started a company with a bunch of buddies, and we had grown it to about 400 people and then sold it to Hitachi. And I had to stay on for a year, which is not unusual. And anyway, so while we were building that company, we used some services from the Rain Group. We implemented parts of scaling up. We were active participants in professional services benchmarking. So I had run out of my interest in working for a large kind of Japanese conglomerate, and was kind of, hey, what do I do now? And I just thought, I'd learned all this stuff from building that company. Why don't I just start a consultancy that works with small and mid-sized companies to help them do the same? So I certified as a scaling up coach. I have a number of sales and marketing partnerships with Rain Group and, HubSpot and KLA and others. And I just work with mid-market firms, small firms, and work with their owners to try to grow them. That's the story.
How do you help your clients attract and retain top talent to their organizations?
Yeah, so one of the themes that actually is directly related to the pandemic is, especially for younger talent, is they're much more purpose-driven around their selection of employers. So, they, during the interview process, the core values and the purpose of the organization really drive whether that's a like-minded individual for those people that are in the firm or they're not. So really clearly defining those and articulating core values and purpose goes a long way to attracting the right talent, but also retaining it. I've seen that is something just came across my desk the other day, that 75% of millennials will work for a company for less money if they like their purpose. Right. So I think that's really the core of attracting talent is making that really clear, and there has to be kind of an emotional component to the purpose, like something that, they personally relate to. And that drives, in my opinion, retention and attracting the right talent. if you don't have a core value alignment, chances are the employee's not going to work out, right? They're gonna seem different. People, they won't make decisions the same way. And eventually you'll start to hear rumblings. I'm not sure if Johnny or Susie really fit here, and it's about those core values and also their relationship to the purpose.
So how would you, like, during the interview process versus the onboarding stage, how do you validate that there is alignment between those core values?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I have a bunch of friends that work for Amazon, and I had one individual in particular very close with, and he had a very strong desire to work for AWS, and he was telling me about his interview process, and so his name's Dave, and I said he talked to me after his first interview. I said, "What was it like?" He said, "They listed their 5 core values, and they asked me to give evidence of those, and there was no other questions.
Hmm.
That's it."
That's direct.
That's it. Right. So, and then they went on in further interviews to kind of get into more details, but they just, yes, no on core values right on the first interview. It doesn't matter how senior the job is or how junior. The other thing that I thought was interesting with the Amazon case is he's in an individual contributor role in Amazon, but he's required to do X number of first interviews with potential candidates outside of his department.
Okay.
Every year, and he does the exact same thing. He's required to, give list the core values and ask the potential applicant whether they're a fit or not, and give evidence of those supporting those core values. So I think that's a really good example of making core values front and center, right in the interview process. I think having a scorecard is really good. So a scorecard is a depiction of core values, but also accountabilities and metrics and competencies associated with the position, and having those clearly defined. So they're having the same interview with everybody they interview with. You're asking maybe not exactly the same questions, but you're asking questions about the same kinds of things. So you have a basis for comparison. It's not just, hey, Gord really liked this guy. I think I could have a beer with them. And, Pat thought something else. And you have sort of a random collection of thoughts about whether to hire them or not.
How do you navigate that where you have maybe different cultures? Like, how do you reset the culture? I guess is what I'm trying to ask. And how do you maintain it with existing employees as well as trying to attract the new ones?
Yeah, so I think developing an awareness of a difference in culture. So what in many companies we've come across, and we use a culture tool that kind of assesses cultures. A company may be comprised of a culture in R&D that's different from a culture in sales, which is different from a culture in operations. And I think just identifying that there are differences is goes a long way to solving it. Because, you might, be working with a company and say, oh, well, we have these core values. Of course, everyone subscribes to them. But unless you actually dig deep, right? And in this particular case, we recommend kind of a survey, like that articulates these pockets of unique culture. And then you need a very strong program change management plan to kind of drive in the uniform culture across the groups. And then, we've all been in companies where, marketing doesn't like sales and sales doesn't like R&D and R&D doesn't like finance. And, it's because of these cultures that, subcultures that form inside the company. And it needs to be a very deliberate kind of culture build around the core values that the company wants.
So how do you determine upskilling, reskilling? How do you know that the people, I guess the tools that you want to implement, how do you know that these individuals will be the people that you want to keep investing in? Like, how do you determine between someone that says yes and then they realize they're not really a fit for it, they change direction? Is that what you uncover during this process?
Yeah, you'll like in the culture test, you'll uncover differentials in the cultures of the sub departments. I think if you're looking on an individual basis, I would recommend kind of a talent assessment, which is a high level thing. It's you look at two dimensions. It's almost like, the 4x4 matrix, right? Their fit in your organization, which is fit to core values, and their productivity in their current role. So, those two dimensions. And then up in the top right is a potential A player, right? If they're a high fit and they're not productive in the role, they're probably a B player. If they're low fit and they're low productivity, they're probably a C player. And then you have the BCs off to the right. It's just plot every person in the company. Every single, and it's a deliberate process. Like I remember, certainly when I was at Deloitte, we would do it once a quarter. Is plot everybody in dimensions like that. I did it at the consulting company that I work with. Okay, where is everybody? And you have a list of A's, B's, and C's, and then are they coachable or not? Is there training that's required or not? Or should they be working with another company? And you want to kind of over time move as many people as you can into the upper right quadrant. The problem with a low culture fit is that they're never going to move off that dimension.
Yeah.
So the upside isn't there. So somebody can be a really high fit often and not be productive in the role. That's okay because you can train them.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, a culture in the recent years, I find is a real big one. It makes a huge impact. I've been to companies that also scaled. Sometimes they didn't pay attention to culture, and then they had challenges. So that totally makes sense to me. Let's tackle strategy. Like, how do you help clients develop and execute a winning strategy for their business? Like, when you're called to them, I'm assuming the majority of people have declining sales or they want to scale per se. So how do you do that audit? How do you help them?
Yeah, so there's a couple of fundamental principles, I would say. Sandbox, core customer, niche, right? So the sandbox is where do you want to play, and often the sandbox is just too big. It's massive, So there's not a narrow enough market or a niche. So we work to, and I'll give you an example in a minute. We look to establish a niche, and then something that you can dominate, right? And then the second thing is really understanding who your core customer is. And it's not an industry and it's not a title. It's a person, that, has characteristics, right? And, so for me, my core customer is obviously an entrepreneur mid-market. We tend to do a lot of work in tech and professional services, but they embrace change. They read a lot of books. They're humble. They don't think they know all the answers. If you say something to them, they're going to listen, right? Those are the type of people that we want to work with. So we did some work for a Salesforce partner, and they were like a general contractor Salesforce partner, right? Like they would do Sales Cloud and Marketing Cloud and Service Cloud and these industry solutions and all these industry specializations, and their business is somewhat plateaued. And that space is really hard to differentiate in, right? If you're implementing someone else's IT product, it's very hard to stand out. And so we used a bunch of tools, including Core Customer and Sandbox and One Page Plan and other things from scaling up. But what we really focused on is, okay, having all those disciplines is almost impossible to scale because you'll never have all the right skills. It's impossible to have, unless you're Accenture or Deloitte or somebody that has thousands of consultants. So let's pick a subset of that where you can win. And so we worked through a process. Some of the things that I mentioned, we arrived at, kind of service center transformations as like a very narrow part of Salesforce. They picked only two industries, communications and financial services, and they focused on that. And that's it, right? And that was, as soon as they did that, win rate goes up. They have more of a uniform consulting mix. You can train to it, right? Because they have the same skills, right? All parts of their practice tended to go a little bit better because they were focused on a niche, right? So that, like a niche, one of the best examples is in the furniture market, right? So, IKEA, the largest furniture company in the world, right? They only participate in flat pack furniture, right? That's all they do. It's right in their, description, flat pack furniture. You buy it, you walk out with it. It's in boxes. but that's only 7% of the market, but they own 70% of that 7%.
Wow.
Right. So I think a niche is like, when I first start working with a client, I'll always try to figure out like how well defined is their market. Do they really have a very specific thing they're going after? And if not, then that's one of the first things we tackle.
Can you describe a time like you had to help a client pivot their strategy in response to a market change?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so this probably one of my favorite clients that I've worked with, and you know just went through a horrible transition with COVID. So they were in the event management space, right? So I contracted to do some work with them the first week of March in 2020. And so they do like corporate events, big pharmaceutical company, big automotive companies doing a global kickoff. They'll be the guys that run the event. But they also have a wedding side of their business. So, 2 weeks later, the CEO calls me and he says, I don't have any revenue. I have no clients. Every event's been canceled. There's no weddings this summer. No one's going to corporate. So he had already had this in the works, but we helped with kind of taking it to a few larger clients. But he created like a really high end studio for virtual corporate events. Like it looks like CNN. It's of the same quality, right? So you could have your management team with select people that met COVID requirements in a really high end studio, broadcast, around the world or in your set geography, while having people participate remotely. This evolved to, part in person, part virtual. But that studio, that pivot was created, during COVID. And then now that COVID is, not in front and center anymore, I think they've just lifted the global emergency status or something.
Yeah.
But now he has this studio to combine with live events, which is a huge differentiator.
Cool.
So that was, we still work with that particular client more on the sales side. But I just, the tenacity and persistence that founder had was just unbelievable. He pivoted the business with this. I think by April he had lost his entire management team. They just quit.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. So he was left with almost no employees, and he's over his pre-pandemic revenue number now
That's incredible. So then how do you balance between short-term and long-term vision? So that case you just gave, that was, very tactical short-term. You had to figure out something to survive.
Yeah.
But in general, like how would you determine how you approach that?
Yeah. So I think there needs to be a connection between, 3 to 5 year like imperatives, annual priorities, and quarterly priorities, and the tight connection between those three, I think, balance. So on the 3 to 5 year, we like to do a flywheel exercise, which is essentially, what are the main activities that turn your flywheel, like your business, make your business run, and can you accelerate any of those, right? So there's no more than 4 to 6. There's lots of information written about this. It's a Jim Collins concept, flywheel. So establishing your flywheel and then saying, okay, well, how do we turn this faster, right? And those might be your initiatives for 3 to 5 years. And then when you're planning your year, take those big things in your flywheel and maybe make some annual priorities. Those are getting into medium term. And then when you plan your quarter, your annual priorities should directly relate to your quarter, should have a relationship to your quarterly priorities. So you're tackling the 3 to 5 year, your 1 year priorities are related to your 3 to 5 year, and your quarterly priorities are 90-day subsets that directly relate to your annual. Then it all hangs together. It's when, the company's off doing these other things 3 to 5 year, they have no relationship to their annual, and people are just doing whatever they want in the quarter, where you get misalignment.
So then how do you ensure your team is executing on your strategy effectively and efficiently?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One is metrics, right? So if you establish an annual set of priorities, they should be aligned with metrics that measure the attainment of that strategy, like 2 or 3 core metrics that are front and center. Everybody sees them, they're visible. And the same would be true of quarterly, right? So on the quarterly side, you would have like a couple metrics, and we always suggest that there's a main thing for a quarter, like what's the main thing, and keep the main thing the main thing. So a good example of that would be the one that resonates with me is Facebook, right? So when they went public in 2012, they went out without a mobile version of their product, right? And so they went out on a high valuation, and then it just plummeted because the analysts lost confidence in their ability to deliver mobile. So the leadership team got together and said, our main thing for this quarter is to produce mobile, and everybody in the company is going to work on it. If it doesn't have to do with releasing a mobile version of our product, then it's not important, right? And so they actually delivered a mobile version in, 1 quarter. And, the rest is kind of history, right? That's their predominant platform. It drove Facebook to its astronomical success. But, the core thing is they're keeping the main thing the main thing.
Awesome. How do you manage cash flow and ensure that you have the resources to scale your business?
Sorry, tactical?
Cash flow.
Oh, cash flow. Oh, okay. So on the cash flow side, I was, I'll tell you a story about it in a minute, but the cash conversion cycle is kind of really understanding exactly how, not just everybody thinks cash flow is a finance thing. It's not a finance thing at all. It's a company thing. It involves sales, involves delivery, involves R&D, involves operations, involves finance. Finance are just maybe closer to the score, but everybody has to have an impact. And when you do your cash conversion cycle, analyze it properly, exactly where you can make incremental improvements in order to have, the cash you need in order to grow your business. So I was a guest speaker on a tech startup kind of forum with CEOs, and these were relatively small companies. They were like, $1 million, $2 million, like they weren't huge, and they're, obviously had lofty expectations. So there was me, and there was some people from BDC, and there was other marketing specialists, and there was a banker on, a banker for, I think it was, I can't remember, it was one of the big banks. But anyways, the format of it was, the entrepreneurs and management team would spend, 30 minutes with each one of these stakeholders, and they would offer suggestions to them. Then they'd have a round table at the end. Well, the banker, the first question they asked, what's your cash conversion cycle? They couldn't answer the question. They didn't even know what it was. Right. So, at the end, the banker said, if you ever want to loan money or borrow money to grow your business, it looks like you probably will need a cash injection. You have to know what that is, and you need to have like a detailed understanding of it. Otherwise, we're not going to give money to somebody who doesn't understand how they generate cash. Right. So I think that's the foundation, is understanding your cash conversion cycle.
So how would you describe that? Is that when you say from quote to cash, that whole process?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe even from lead to cash.
How long it takes you to land a client, onboard them, and actually generate your first
revenue. Yeah.
Revenue.
Yeah. So there's the sort of interesting story of Dell, right? In their early days, they had, they were probably 50 people or something, and they were just starting to grow, and they're having a bit of cash problems. And, they brought in a CFO, and their their DSO was like negative 48 days. Mm-hmm. Right. So it was too long. They were taking too long to get cash. The CFO did some analysis on conversion, used some other specific planning tools. He got their DSO to negative 36 days. Wow. Which is unheard of. Like, how do you do that? Right. Yeah. So you probably remember way back when Dell was selling home office computers and things like that you had to pay up front.
Yeah.
That was part of it. Right. So it's not a finance thing, but your terms and conditions and things like that can have a huge impact on cash flow.
I would imagine it's a lot more challenging when you start getting to the enterprise and figuring out when you have to deliver something like a service versus an actual product.
Yeah. But it's I work with a lot of sales teams, right? And you know, uh, what $1 of revenue with certain terms does not necessarily equate to another dollar of revenue with completely different terms. And often the sales teams don't quite understand that when they come to you and say, well, I can sign this deal. They're not asking for a discount, but they said they want 120 days. No, we can't do that. No,
Yeah.
that's not the same as having 30 days. It has a big impact on our company, right? So there's things like that that go on that, probably require more attention. But,
Yeah.
the what I've seen a lot of companies do is they, especially if they're smaller, they try to create an environment where everybody acts like an owner. So they understand the implication. Well, you just went from 30 to 60 days on turn on, on net 60 instead of 30. That this is what the implication is. Yeah.
I've seen, yeah, I totally understand that. It makes a lot of sense on that one. So then how do you balance between investing in growth versus maintaining financial stability?
Yeah. So, the one thing that I've seen a lot of clients do recently is they create a planning horizon that's, they have a 1 year and they have a 3 year. The industry term for it is a 3 HAG, like 3 year hairy audacious goal. And they, they plan, the initiatives, and they plan all their metrics monthly for 3 years. So you set a 3 year target that's some kind of growth target, but you've also taken a granular look at, month one, month two, month three, month 12, month 24, month 36, cash, revenue, inventory, margin, all those things are planned out so that you can balance and exactly where those balances should be so that you're off, you can course correct. So it's I would say it's that detailed 3 year plan that gives you the confidence that you can grow and deliver in the short term.
So with the recent increase in interest rates that has affected the market, I would imagine um, it's much more expensive to get capital these days. So how has that affected, from what you can see with your clients? How has that affected their plans, or has it?
No, it has for sure, right? The obviously ones that required or relied more on debt are more impacted, right? I think that I just got kind of a report from like a SaaS community on what people's expectations are for financial performance this year, and they're generally saying their revenue numbers they're planning now for like to be 20% lower than what they had originally planned in December of this year. So I think that has to do with a lot of things, but I think the cost of capital is certainly one of them. So people are ratcheting back a little bit their growth expectations, and I hear more like, let's deliver our year profitably as opposed to growth at all costs. Right. So that's sort of the sentiment that I see. That's how it's changing sort of businesses. I think, the hurdle for an exit is higher, right? If interest rates are higher, that means that your business needs to be a lot more valuable, to command a premium, right? So, the people that are looking to buy or sell, it's affected their expectations on both sides.
So how do you foster a culture of innovation and continuous improvement in your organization? Like, how do you get clients? Maybe this is one of the reasons why they're not growing as they need to grow. So how do you get that started?
Yeah. So there's two parts to it. I mean, I view it as like innovation in the business. Like how do you create, process innovation, maybe small things. And then the secondary is innovation around products. How do you create that? So on the first topic, right, I think that innovation is a culture. It's a dimension of your culture, right? So, you've probably read or seen books like 2 Second Lean and other things like that. People always think, well, lean has to do with manufacturing. No, it doesn't. Lean has to do with any business. And do you have a culture defined that's going to continually focus on incremental improvements. Doesn't matter whether it's in finance or HR or sales or R&D or wherever, where you're just ruthless about, and very collaborative around grabbing those innovations and implementing them. So I think that culture is a big part of innovation and creating that culture. On the product side, releasing new innovative products, planning and metrics, I think, go a long way to doing that. So I've seen a lot of organizations have had like a desire to create new products, and at the same time they're complaining that there's not enough new products coming out. So they haven't really kind of created a detailed process, like a stage gate process that says, there's 1 to 7 steps in releasing a product, and we have 20 at step 1 and 30 at step 2 and 5 at step 3 and 2 at step 4 and so on. And how often are there stage gate changes in the product release process? So getting really systematized around new product introduction, I think, is a second thing that a lot of mid-market companies, it's much more prevalent in enterprise companies, are pretty good at that stuff, but the mid-market companies, not so much, especially if they have a kind of a really unstructured founder that's just, oh, we can do that and we can do this and we can we can do all this, right? And if you have a good sandbox, if you have a good core customer, and you have a niche, you can always test your innovations against the target market. Like, are these things that they really want? Right, as opposed to just good ideas. So process on innovation, culture, change your culture, drive collaboration, innovation at every, like, right down to the lower level employees. I know that there was a story that I heard once about, can't remember who was visiting NASA. It might have been one of the presidents of the United States who was visiting NASA, and he's walking in, and there's a janitor on the floor or something, and he asks him kind of, what do you do? And he said, well, I help put people on the moon, right? Like, and he says, oh, really? And he went on to explain, this gets back to kind of, retaining employees, is, how his role, like, in order for people to get to the moon, there can't be any contamination of our aircraft or spaceships. In order for there to be no contamination, this facility needs to be spotless. So we don't have that. I make sure that this facility is spotless, right? So he could connect his role to the purpose of the organization in kind of a compelling way, which is what you want in every business. And that's part of culture.
I love stories like that, when you have people that are so, like, dialed in, they know what their purpose is, and they really love what they do. Those are great stories. So now, how do you balance innovation with risk management and maintaining core competencies?
In smaller firms, like when they have the process sort of semi-defined, it needs some governance on it. Like, you need to have a steering committee, or you need to have like a product innovation committee, or some small group of people that say, this is where everything is in our stage gates. We're having these things coming through. Do we still want to proceed? Right. And it's like broad stakeholders. It's not just the product development group. It's sales, it's marketing, it's executive of the company. In the firms that I deal with, that level of, oversight, it's not to slow things down. It's just to say, hey, like, if we release this product 3 weeks from now, are we really going to be able to sell it? Are you sure? Does the sales team know how to do it? They don't have a conversation with the client about it, right? So that's often missing. I had one client we worked with recently that I thought it was really clever. They created a giant magnetic board, their manufacturer, and it had every product that they were developing in every stage, and it was color coded by stage, and they had all of them up on a magnetic board, like 25 products. Wow. And they had everybody in the company walk by it to come in and out of the floor. So they had a visualization of product development for everybody.
That's powerful.
So they could see it. Yeah, very powerful. Right. And so it took a little while for them to get them, but then they could, they're like many of the other clients, right, is, when are we going to get a new product? We haven't even had a new product in, 10 months. But now they can just look on the board and see. And often the the development would be slowed down by the interdepartmental communication, right? I'm waiting on something from procurement. I'm waiting for engineering to do this.
Yeah.
I don't have the target market report from marketing organization. And that's what slows it down. But when it's front and center, everybody can see it.
I've seen similar stories when they talk about like work in progress. Like, are you managing that properly? And the visibility, like key visibility to where things are, has always been a challenge. But I love that example you gave. I think that would be extremely powerful for people who could actually act on that.
Yeah.
How did they actually start thinking of how to put that together? Do you have any idea how that came to be?
That idea actually, like most ideas, came from one of the like manufacturing staff, and we were in a quarterly meeting with them, and they had, kind of articulated that new product introduction was, not what they had hoped for, right? They had a bunch of trade shows coming up, and they're like, hey, we have the fall trade shows. We don't have anything to talk about, right? And so an individual on that team brought it forward. Hey, I worked at this other company. We had this board, it depicted this, and it was really powerful. So they implemented it. So I think the story in that is like the best ideas are actually, with your team.
Yeah. You
need to create an environment where they feel comfortable bringing them forward, right?
Yeah.
And they're not, scrutinized or, just let them do it. Let them try.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about brand promise.
To me, a brand promise is the desired perception you want to create in your customer's mind, right? Whatever that is, like how they think of you, how they perceive you. One of the things that I like to do is have a client define, what can they get from your company that they can't get from anyone else, right? And often you get sort of like generic things, right? Like no, they like everybody's saying that, right? So what is the one thing? And then from there, break it down into kind of like a lead brand promise and a couple secondary brand promises, so that and that's what the customer can count on and expect from your organization. And then I think when it gets really powerful is when there's I call it a brand promise guarantee, but it's almost like a mechanism. Jim Collins would call it a catalytic mechanism, where you transfer risk from the client to your organization. Right. So an example would be of a brand promise guarantee would be, this is a scaling up client, Granite Rock, and in Arkansas, they sell gravel. Right. So I don't know about you, but, gravel seems fairly commodified to me. Right. It's just broken up rocks, and, you deliver it to a construction site or to a garden or whatever. Right. So they were very much about the customer experience and customer service. So they created a brand promise guarantee that accompanies their brand promise, that if you're unhappy for any reason with anything that Granite Rock delivered, just don't pay your invoice. Right. And so that created a behavior change in the team. So it could be something silly, right? Like you piled the gravel in the wrong spot, or, the invoice was wrong, or you were 3 days late, or, and so nobody in the company wanted to be part of that process, because it, like, my client didn't pay their invoice, or somebody's going to dig in and figure out something that went wrong. Right. So, it did happen, but it illuminated issues in the business that they could then solve. Right. So they have like a 10% price premium on gravel. Because they've engineered this mechanism, this catalytic mechanism that shifts risk, right? And the customers like it. They've also grown astronomically, right? So I had another client that is in the cattle chute business, and we went through a similar process. Not all clients can arrive at a a brand promise guarantee, it's difficult, but they had a brand promise around safety, right? Their equipment, animals are not going to get hurt, ranchers are not going to get hurt, right? They added a brand promise guarantee, and the guarantee was, if anybody, an animal or a rancher, gets hurt using our equipment, we'll refund all of your money, right? So that reinforces the perception, right?
Yeah.
Right, of safety, which was their lead brand promise. So that's on the brand promise side. The value prop. I think looking at it in the context of an attribute model is kind of an interesting way to look at it. So, what are the attributes that the customers want in your target market? What are your competitors delivering? And where's the white space? Like thinking of it strategically like that is a way to look at it. So you deliver against, where the white space is, right? Good example when you think about Southwest Airlines, right? They don't try to be the luxurious airline. Now, they're going to get you where you want to go fast, least amount of delays, reasonable, good service, and well priced. Right, so they're occupying a different part of the market. So going through that analysis on where you can deliver value, I think, is another important exercise for firms to think about.
So how do you ensure that you're consistent across all touch points with your customers?
So for a customer, obviously the analysis that leads from touch points that is usually done is some kind of buying journey, right? Like how are they touching your firm? It does that touch point lead to a reinforcement of your brand promise or not, right? And there's this concept of zero moment of truth, right? Like you can do 99 of 100 things right, one thing wrong, and it'll affect their perception of your company, right? So I think it's very deliberate, around designing those touch points and measuring them and making sure that they're actually consistent with the desired perception that you have in the market. I like to see clients that have done buying journeys to kind of figure out how customers actually buy and where they're interacting.
I think even challenges with companies is how they map that process, what they do internally to the experience that a customer has on the outside. And I think until you're able to kind of understand that, it's tough to make change, improvement, things of that nature. Because I don't think.
Yeah. No.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you can have a great funky website that looks awesome, but if you click to process a return and the return process is no good, it defeats the whole purpose. Yeah.
I want to kind of circle back on kind of metrics, because we talked a little bit earlier on, and a lot of what we talked about is like understanding where you are, measuring, having more granular sort of plans. So how do you determine your KPIs, your key performance indicators? And then, we talk about going back to, culture and stuff and like objectives of the company, the purpose, but how do you mix, OKRs, KPIs? There's a lot of these terms out in the market. So how do you approach this? How do you organize this with your clients?
Yeah. So the one thing that often gets in the way is that organizations have a hard time determining what a lead indicator is versus just an indicator, right? And so in our thinking, a lead indicator is something that changes frequently and is predictive, right? So we want to, when you're assigning metrics and developing metrics, the extent that you can identify lead metrics, that are predictive of an outcome, and then assign them to individuals and functions, that is kind of, to me, the kind of best way to do it, because you're not looking at things in the rearview mirror like revenue or gross margin or things like that. You're looking at, if you want to, for example, if you want to predict the product development process, like how are we doing on product development? You could look at how many products were released every month, or you could look at stage gate changes in your product development process. That to me is a better indicator of velocity of product development than just looking at the end goal of how many products did you release. If you have 7 stages and every month you have 10 stage gate changes, that indicates one level of velocity. If the next month you have 20 stage gate changes, that's much more predictive. So I think one thing is determining, what are the lead metrics by function? Assigning them to both individuals and to departments are critical. So that's one sort of best practice. The other would be what I would call an operationalized BHAG. So a BHAG is a big, hairy, audacious goal. Everyone knows that, right? Some companies have been able to develop metrics that create visibility of the BHAG. So the best example that I would have is an Australian company called Red Balloon. So they sell gifting experiences. So if you want to jump out of a plane or go down a whitewater rafting or, drive in a red balloon, they have, affiliate relationships and they sell those experiences all over the world. So they're scaling up client. They've had a very successful run. They're growing over 40% per year. They've actually had 2 or 3 iterations of their BHAG because they've exceeded them. And the original BHAG was, we want to, fulfill 1 million experiences. They put a lofty goal out there and they had it up in their office. And, there's television monitors all over that show a running total of their BHAG. Everybody can see it. It's on, it's on their web banners and all that kind of stuff. Hey, so they blew that one away. So then they went to 4 million. They exceeded that. And now they have a BHAG they want to serve a sustainable gift experience somewhere in the world every second. Right. So they have they're right now, they're at 49 seconds. So every 49 seconds, somewhere in the world, somebody is enjoying a red balloon experience. And they keep a running total on, when it's going down. They got a ways to go to a second. But that galvanizes the culture, the focus, like it's operational. They have a number. Everybody's looking at it. It's up in the office. It's on the computers. Everybody knows that they're at 49 seconds. Right. So that's another way to use metrics to reinforce the strategy and direction. The North Star of the company is to devise an operational BHAG.
How do you ensure that the team is aligned?
To the BHAG, yeah. So and to that is make them part of the process. Like, have them, come up with the metrics, have them set some of the targets for them. People are much more aligned when they've, had a voice at the table than, having been told, right? So if you looked at working with a client right now that's, in the manufacturing industry, we first established, functional metrics for the manufacturing department, right? The manufacturing department has, operations underneath it. It has procurement underneath it. So you define the functional metrics, then you create a process to roll them down to the department leaders or the team leaders. Okay, what's our procurement metrics that relate to our overall functional metrics, right? And so they're in the process of doing that for each team lead. Then the team lead rolls their team metrics down to the individual. So the individual's metrics are a subset and related to the team leader metrics. The team leader metrics are related to the manufacturing functional metrics. So you have alignment between the metrics, which first of all helps get people to have buy-in, but it also helps with motivation, because if you know what your metrics are, then you know what the goal is. Your role is much more clearly defined. You know whether you're being successful or not.
How do you introduce proper lead scoring? How do you ensure that people are putting the right value to it and so that you can measure it properly?
Are you talking about metrics as a whole or specifically lead gen?
Just in lead gen, because we talked about, owning it in the beginning or having people more accountable. So I would imagine just that beginning part of a proper lead to understand that where where people are in the funnel or how serious they are, how are you, like, who would be responsible for that, and how do you keep them accountable for that score? Like, is that a collaborative effort, or how do you determine that?
Yeah, I think my experience would be that you know there's a marketing funnel, and then there's a sales funnel, right? And there's stages in each, right? And that the criteria for being at each stage is often not specific enough, and that's where the alignment problems come. Is
That
that
was kind of
what's an MGL as an example versus an MQL versus an SQL, and everybody has a different interpretation of that, and
yes.
that leads to finger pointing between sales and marketing, right? Like, our MGLs are no good. Marketing's not delivering. I'm not getting enough sales qualified leads, or we're sending all kinds of leads to sales. They're just not following up, right? So, I think it's a very comprehensive process to define the criteria, and then very good education to both stakeholders in sales, marketing, and otherwise as to what are the criteria, and also when does something get handed off to sales, and what do they do with it in what time frame, and when do they send it back and saying it wasn't ready.
So navigating, because that's kind of where my question was coming from, and this is where, like, how do you keep, because I've seen typically sales and marketing are separate. Do you put them under one leader that's responsible for both to ensure that the handoff is of quality? And I've seen a lot of, like, a chief revenue officer type role come in that I think kind of encompasses both those roles. Do you see any of that? Do you how do you navigate between sales and marketing? And would you put them together, or do you think?
Yeah. So ideally, I would put them together. I would have a CRO, and they're responsible for both. The challenge is that often it's hard to find a CRO that has a broad enough skill set that they understand marketing and sales. If they come from sales, the position will gravitate to a sales focused revenue function. The reciprocal is also true, more marketing generated. So finding the right person who has the balance. You only have one accountability then, so there's nowhere to kind of point fingers.
Hide. Yeah.
And hide, right? Yeah. So I do like the concept of a CRO in many industries, for sure, for exactly that reason.
We're almost out of time. Where can people find you? We'll make sure the information below. What's the best way that they can get in contact with you?
You can certainly reach me on email, gsmith@altaconsulting.ca. You can get to our website, which is www.altaconsulting.ca as well. I do respond to LinkedIn messages. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. So any one of those three is absolutely a great way to connect with me if any of this sort of content resonates with you.
Is there anything else you want to kind of talk about before we leave? Anything you want to promote? You were mentioning that you were working on a book. We were talking before.
Yeah, so I'm working on a book. The book is targeted at service firms, more specifically, the professional services side of SaaS firms or professional services firms. It's a recipe for growing the professional services side of your business. And it goes all the way from almost everything we talked about today around growth foundations like core values, purpose, business model, talks a little bit about niche marketing, how to attract, how to sell, how to deliver work in a professional services context. And then finally, it talks about, how do you devise or strategize your firm so that it's easy to exit from. Right. So it covers all those dimensions. Probably be out in the fall. But that's certainly something to be aware of that's coming.
It sounds very interesting. I definitely will pick up a copy when you get ready to be released. I see a big need in understanding on professional services, especially in the SaaS world. When you talk about generating leads, sometimes you might have to start, maybe counterintuitive, but you might need to start from a professional services aspect before 100%. You actually get them onto the actual product.
100%. Yeah. And that's often, as you probably know, is counterintuitive to a sales organization, right? They resist that kind of No, we don't. What do you mean we're selling a consulting engagement? I need to sell my software, right? And
Yeah.
it's hard to change the mindset on that one.
Well, we'll look forward to that in the fall. Gord, thank you very much for joining us today. But again, thank you again for your time today.
No, my pleasure. It was a great chat. Thanks, Pat.
Okay, take care.